Welcome to the latest BuffZone podcast. I'm Brian Howell, and pleased to be joined as always by my colleague Pat Rooney. Pat, how you doing?
Doing well, sir. You enjoy your bye week?
I did. Got some family time that we don't normally get. I like taking those Saturdays and where there's no football, and you know, I'm not one that's going to sit and watch college football on a bye week. All day Saturday. Was able to go watch one son run across country meet, another son play a couple of baseball games in a doubleheader, and then we went up to Estes Park and saw some elk and just got away as a family a little bit. So um, always enjoyed a time like that. Did you enjoy a bye week? I know you sometimes when the bus travel you don't go anyway, so maybe they're like mini bye weeks for you. But did you enjoy no football game?
It was definitely a mini bye week. I'm still pretty engaged with football, even when you're out on the road. But also
Right.
got a nice family hike in on Sunday, so it was nice. Try to enjoy those moments. For me, in the basketball, obviously, is going to heat up. So, like you said, good to take a slow weekend while we can. But we're right back at it now. Big one this Saturday night with number 18 Kansas State coming into town.
Yeah, and we're going to talk real quick about some basketball at the end, but let's get into Kansas State. You know, I don't want to rehash UCF because that feels like a month ago at this point. But obviously the Buffs are coming off a really nice win. I mean, their best performance under Coach Prime was that game at UCF. And now the task is, can you repeat that?
Yeah, we talked about the UCF game that is last week, and be curious to see how they come out this week. If you're a UCF fan, you might be wondering how that bye week treated them the week before the
Yeah.
bus came into town. They played really well, had a great rally the previous week to that on the road at TCU, seemed to be on a little high themselves. Obviously, didn't have their A game against the Buffs. I think the Buffs had something to do with that as well. But now it's kind of the Buffs' turn to see if they can keep some momentum rolling after the bye week. They said all the right things this week. Kind of what you would expect them to say, but we'll find out Saturday night. Not only that, but they have to wait till the late kickoff as well on
Yeah.
Saturday night to get this thing rolling. So, I think that's a big question. Will they be able to keep that momentum going from what we saw where they left off down in Orlando?
Yeah, it's always interesting with bye weeks too, as to whether I'm sure there's a study that's been done as like what teams' records are after a bye week, whether it helps or
Yeah.
not. But like K-State, I don't know the number, I don't have it right in front of me, but I know just in reading about them this week, they have not been good in recent years coming off of a bye, and they are too. So both teams were on a bye last week. The Buffs obviously last year, and I know it's a different team, but last year they went into the bye, that crushing loss to Stanford and then came off the bye, went to UCLA and played just a really bad football game. Didn't play well at all at UCLA. So who knows what the bye week does, right? Whether that gets you right or not. What we
Yeah.
do know with this CU team is that the bye week allowed several guys to heal up, and I'm sure it did for Kansas State as well. But that's the biggest thing out of a bye is it lets some guys that are dinged up, heal up a little bit. And guys like Dallin Hayden talked to us this week. Running backs, especially, they need some time to to heal. Linebackers need some time to heal. Shiloh Sanders, he's back this week after missing the last couple of games with an injury. So the Buffs maybe are a healthier team coming off the bye.
Yeah, you mentioned Dallin Hayden. That's one that I was kind of thinking about that, the bye week probably did hit some real good.
Yeah.
Obviously the run game has been taken off. They've been getting steadily better. Credit where credit is due. Obviously, it was a big question mark coming into the season. Didn't necessarily answer those questions in the first few weeks, but it's really come on of late and really kind of become a
Mhm.
another tool in the toolbox, right, for Shador Sanders and that offense. Hayden's getting more healthy. Michael Welch has been impressive. Isaiah Gustav has been very impressive. Uh, these last few weeks. So I'm curious to see if they get that going, keep that going, because they're going to need that, I think, against Kansas State, even more so than what we saw at Central Florida. Central Florida maybe felt like you could outscore that team. Uh, Colorado might have to on a weekly basis anyway, to a certain extent.
Mhm.
But that becomes less problematic if you can keep that running game going.
Well, and the fact that we've seen it now 3 weeks in a row, that they've shown some commitment to the running game
Yeah.
and that they've won all three games. And, it's been a nice run. Gives me confidence that they're going to keep doing that this week. We've said, and I've said it with other people, like they don't need to be a
Right.
dynamic rushing attack. Just stay committed to it. They've had 90 plus yards in all three games, and nobody's going to get wowed by 90 yards rushing, in college football. But that's a big thing for this team
Yeah.
because it shows some commitment to it. They've been over 100 yards two of those three games, and so I think if they're over 100 yards rushing, that's a very good thing for this Buffs team. And because I'm not sure Kansas State can really, keep up with the passing game of the Buffs. So if you throw that run game in there, they've got to respect that. It's going to open things up for Shador.
And on the other side of the ball, that's another aspect of this team that's gotten better and better as the weeks have progressed. Here is that defense. We talked about it a little bit last
Mhm.
week with how they performed at Central Florida, but uh, big task this week. Can they out physical Kansas State this week?
Yeah, I mean that's going to be a big question mark. That was the question mark going into UCF, and they absolutely did. And
Right.
so I think this will be a bigger challenge. It was a question mark going into North Dakota State as well, because even though they're an FCS team, that's what NDSU is known for. And Coach Prime said it this week, and I thought it even before I heard him say it, but Kansas State kind of profiles like North Dakota State, which makes sense because their head coach Chris Kleiman came from North Dakota State,
Yeah.
several years ago, and that culture at NDSU he helped build, and he's brought that to K State, and so they're kind of similar to North Dakota State in that they're tough. They're going to run the football. They're going to play defense, and they're not going to make a lot of mistakes. And so they kind of profile that way. They're probably a better version of North Dakota State, I would assume. North Dakota State's a pretty good FCS team, but I think K State's a better version of NDSU, and so. But I think the Buffs are a better version uh, of the Buffs than they were on August 29th when they played NDSU.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've improved every week so far. I have to give them credit for that. And that Nebraska game, as it turned out, is really started to be kind of a launching point, at least the second half of that game, for
Hmm.
seeing this team get incrementally better from week to week. So, Brian, for you, if there's a couple keys going into this weekend, this, I feel like we said this going into Central Florida, maybe even more apropos now. If they can get this win, really everything's on the table. You don't really feel like if you get this win, you don't feel like there's an unwinnable game on the schedule anymore.
Right.
You feel like they're really in the mix for that conference race. There's some aspects of the schedule that's set up well. They get a couple of the tougher teams the rest of the way at home. A couple of the ones that have been the most impressive so far in the Big 12, they don't have to play at all, like
Mhm.
BYU. Some things set up nicely. But it all begins Saturday night. Maybe it began with Central Florida because if they lose that, we're not talking about that here.
Right. Right.
But what do you feel like? If you had to narrow it down, keys of victory to kind of turn this thing in the Buffs' favor on Saturday night.
Yeah, they also don't have to play Iowa State. BYU and
Right,
Iowa
that
State
was
are
the
two
other
of the
one.
hot teams.
Yeah,
So, but I think that if most people, if you ask a lot of people, okay, who's the favorite right now in the Big 12? I think a lot of people would say Kansas State. Maybe not everybody, but I think a lot of people would. And so, if they can get this game, I think that's huge for them. I think it's arguably the biggest game in the coach prime era to this point. What I've heard over the last couple of weeks is a lot of people have kind of downplayed every one of CU's wins. One's an FCS team, one is only CSU, one's a bad Baylor team, and UCF clearly looks like they're not as good as what we thought. And so, but if you win this one, nobody's going to question it. That's
right.
a legitimate, okay, woo, Colorado's a contender now. And you're right. I mean, this is when you get that and you're like, yep, we can win every game, the rest of the way. And they still got to play good football. So to play good football this week, I think I mean they've got to avoid turnovers. K-State's one of those teams to me that is really going to make you pay for your turnovers. See you had a bad one very early against UCF, but it didn't hurt them because they got one of their own a few plays later. And so, but K-State seems to me like a team that they'll make you pay for turnovers. So you've got to avoid those. And I think a lot of it, again, sort of like that UCF game, comes down to the run game. The Buffs need a little bit of it, and they can't have Kansas State have a lot of it. And I know I said this against UCF. Like I thought RJ Harvey was the best back they had seen to that point. I think DJ Giddens is the best back they've seen to this point. And so
Yeah.
um, they did a nice job against RJ Harvey. They did a nice job against every running back so far this year. I think it's going to be key to kind of limit what he can do as well. And but then you got the running quarterback, Avery Johnson, that's better than every running quarterback they've played so far this year. So um, yeah, I think there's a lot of keys, but a lot of it comes down to that run game to me.
Yeah, I agree. If I had to whittle it down, obviously, stop and run for the Buffs D is going to be paramount. On the other side of the ball, it's going to get back to that pass rush. We've talked
Mhm.
about it before, the K-State pass rush that it is with this offensive line. Now they have made great strides in the running game. I think we talked about a little bit about this last week. The strides they've made in the running game have been fantastic. We haven't really seen those strides yet in pass protection.
Yeah,
UCF got a couple of sacks, not a bad total if you're a CU fan, but still a lot. I think UCF came into that game with one
right.
through the first portion of the season. K-State's the co-leader with 12 sacks coming in this game through 5 games. Doesn't feel like a gaudy total, but you know what? One of those teams, I think there's 3 or 4 teams with 12 sacks at the top of the league. One of those teams is Baylor, and they
Yeah.
got the bulk of that total against the Buffs here a few weeks back. So that's going to be, the too many of those negative plays it's going to be, I think, too much. You could overcome it against Baylor. I think it'll be too much to overcome against Kansas State. So I think this is the week that offensive line really needs to take a step forward in pass protection. Maybe they did a little bit against UCF. It wasn't much of a factor. UCF was still more effective in that regard than UCF usually is.
Hmm.
So I think the jury is still out whether that's a step forward in pass protection for this line or if they just went up against a really bad pass rush. We'll find out this week because Kansas State is not a bad pass rush. And if they don't protect Shedeur Sanders any better than they did against Baylor a few weeks back, I don't think this is a game where they can get away with that.
Yeah, you're probably right. I do think Shador can hit some big things on this team in the passing game. I think the Buffs have the advantage there, but he's got to be upright to do that, and he can't be limping around and
Yeah, I
and
think they
and
can
hurt.
hit big plays against anyone. I don't think
Yeah,
that's a question anymore with this offense. They're going to
right.
make plays. If
Hmm.
he drops back 40 times, he's going to make big plays. It's just going to
Yeah,
happen. But if he's dropping back 40 times and winds up on his backside for 10 of those, whether it's an actual sack or not, that's going to add up. And against this team, I don't think they can get away with that.
yeah, you're probably right, and I think we're going to find out, whether this pass rush is or whether the pass protection has improved a little bit, and maybe they worked out some things in the bye week. But prediction time. What do you think?
Still not ready up front with the Buffs in a big matchup like this. I think it's going to be a heck of a game. I think it's going to be wildly entertaining. I think it'll be close, but I think Kansas State finds a way at the end. I think that run game's going to be tough for the Buffs to stop. To stop enough to come away with a win. And until I see it with the pass protection, like I said, we saw it against UCF, but they haven't really shown a pass rush against anyone. So until the Buffs can do it against someone that does generate a regular pass rush, I'm still a little skeptical. I think it'll be wildly entertaining though,
Mhm.
and I think Kansas State though will find a way at the end somewhere in the range of 38-31.
Awesome. So, yeah, I agree with a lot of that stuff. But I also think, as I've watched this season play out, K-State has not been very good on their 2 road games. They were horrible against BYU a couple weeks ago. The Buffs, I love the Buffs anytime they're at home, and especially a Saturday night game. I think the atmosphere is going to be electric. I give the Buffs the edge because they're at home, and I think they're going to be able to do enough. I think Kansas State is still going to get some things done in the run game. I think the Avery Johnson is going to hurt them a little bit. DJ Giddens probably a little bit. But I'm going Buffs 31-28. I think they keep the momentum going, get that 4th straight win, and maybe into the top 25, but certainly into legitimate contention for the Big 12. So I think this is going to be a huge one for the Buffs.
I think this is the only second time out of the 6 games that we've offered predictions for that we've disagreed on the winner. I mean, we've maybe fudged the score a little bit here and there, but we both were wrong against Central Florida. But if memory serves, I picked Nebraska and you had picked the Buffs in that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that's the only time we were a split decision on these predictions.
Yeah. You were right that time, and Buff fans are hoping you're wrong this time.
Yeah, we'll have a lot more to talk about next week if that's the case.
That's right. Well, yeah, either way, it's gonna, there's gonna be a lot to talk about whether, this team is in legit contention or whether they've kind of got to pick up the pieces and move forward. I will say this: if they lose this game, I don't think it knocks them out of contention. I think that just
No, I mean
by
I agree. Yeah.
by winning it, I think you're firmly in that conversation and in a really good spot going forward. So I
Right.
think most things are on the table for them if they lose this game still.
Sure. If you lose, we've seen some crazy results already in the Big
Yeah,
12. We still have more than half the season still to go, at least as far as league play.
yeah,
Would anticipate some more wild results along the way. But like we said earlier, you win this, you're kind of in the driver's seat and in charge of your own destiny. If you lose, nothing's necessarily off the table. There'll be more crazy results. You can still go out and get your own results going forward. But yeah, you get this win and really kind of changes the complexion of the rest of the season, I think, for the Buffs.
yeah, yeah. So we're gonna find out what it looks like. We'll be back next week to talk about that. But before we get out of here today, a few other things. Let's talk about some basketball because preseason, polls and things like that for the Big 12 are coming out. The women's poll is out, and they were ninth. And wasn't a surprise. I mean, the Buffs, coming off back-to-back Sweet 16s, you can look at it and say, well, that's a disrespectful spot, but they lost almost everybody from last year. There's 10 of 14 newcomers on this team, and another one that's basically a newcomer because she redshirted last year. So essentially 13 new players out of or 11 new players out of 14. So I can see where that one is. But my take on that one is that's where I expected, but I think the Buffs are going to finish better than that.
Yeah, on the men's side, similar sentiment. They finished 15th in the preseason as a coaches poll in the Big 12. Used to these media polls in years back with the Pac-12, but
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about that anymore in our new conference home. But 15th, probably what I expected. I'd have been surprised if they were last, but not totally shocked. Let's face it, they lost 3 NBA draft picks. They lost most of their scoring. They lost most of their rebounding. They lost most of their production across the board. Not as many kind of raw newcomers as the women's side, but between one redshirt freshman, three true freshmen,
Mhm.
and a couple of transfers. I mean, there's 6 of their scholarship players have not played a single minute of Division I basketball yet. There's really only two, maybe 2.5 established Division I players. Julian Hammond certainly is one of those. He's coming off an injury-shortened year. Andre Yakumovsky, certainly a solid player and is going to be a big contributor for the Buffs. Enjoyed a 4-year run at Washington State. And then Javon Ruffin, who has had his moments a couple years back with the Buffs, but obviously has dealt with injury troubles, more than he's been a productive player at CU. So not totally surprised that that's where they finished. But I'll tell you what, I do not think this is a 15th place team in the Big 12. I'm anticipating writing about it more in the upcoming 3 extra points on
Yeah.
Monday. I don't think it's an NCAA tournament team. I think they will be challenged to be an NIT team this year, but and there certainly there's questions in the backcourt. But I think it's a pretty versatile team. I think if they stay healthy, there's a lot of pieces there. I think they'll, be able to eke out some victories at home. And I think they'll surprise a few people along the way. I would be surprised if they finish 15th once it's all said and done.
Yeah, and to me, I mean, you know this team better than I do, but I think there's a lot of intriguing players on this team that,
Yeah.
if they play to their potential, they could really lift this team, way higher than 15th. But we haven't seen it yet, to your point, and so it's going to be very curious. I think this is going to be one of Tad's most interesting coaching jobs to see what he does with this team. But season's coming around the corner. We're what is it? It's October 10th as we're doing this, so we're less than a month away from opening day. So we're about 3-4 weeks away from opening day in basketball, and it's crazy. Seems like football just started, but basketball's about ready to kick off as well.
Yeah, we'll be about 3 weeks away come Monday from opening night. So um for men's basketball, you get a preview of this team as we're chatting here on Saturday before the Kansas State game really gets rolling. Doors will open at the CU Event Center at 4:30 with the inter-squad scrimmage
Mhm.
set for 5. Get your first look at these guys and The new look buffs, I would anticipate it won't be run exactly as a game. It's kind of have they done in years past. They'll probably play 10-minute quarters or so, jumble up the combinations on either side. But admission's free. Doors will be open at 4:30. You can come out and get your first look at the team uh, before the football game on Saturday. And then the following week, unfortunately, it's going to be smack in the middle of the football game at Arizona. But at 3 o'clock on the 19th, they'll be at an exhibition game against Pomona Pitzer, featuring Tad Boyle's son, Pete Boyle. They did this a few years ago when Jack Boyle was a senior at at Pomona Pitzer, and we'll be doing it again. So still plenty of tune-ups ahead for this bunch, but for the fans, they can kind of come out on Saturday and get a look at these guys.
I hope Tad's able to draw up some defense against Pomona Pitzer.
Yeah, right.
Well, and hey, real quick, those people that have been around and follow basketball, Pete really well, Dancing Pete, because he's
Yeah,
that's the little kid that was dancing around and with the broom, wiping up the sweat in the key, for a number of years. So it's kind of it's always interesting to see these kids grow up. I mean, my own kids and things like that, but to see Dancing Pete now playing basketball is pretty cool.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Pretty awesome. We'll see about drawing up the plays. Tad, for the exhibition game, he'll probably take the lead on the coaching. But for the inner squad, he usually sits in the stands or behind the scores table or something like that, and kind of lets the assistants run the show. So I'm sure
Yeah.
Mike Roan will be in charge of one team, maybe Bill Greer or Danny Manning in charge of the other team. Usually, don't know that for sure, but that's usually the setup for the inner squad. And Tad kicks back and kind of watches what happens.
Awesome. Well, real quick, what else is going on in fall sports? You got
Yeah,
soccer, volleyball, cross
really,
country.
really shocking result for the soccer team this past weekend. Had gotten up to number 14 in the top 25, but just fell apart against TCU. Kind of a shocking decision. I was surprised that TCU or the Buffs scored a goal. It was a top 25 matchup. TCU was 23 coming into it. The Buffs are at home. The Buffs score first a couple minutes into it, and then the wheels completely fell off. TCU scored 3 times in a span of just a couple minutes, and the route was on. It was a 6-1 final. You want to be able to kind of forget about it, but as we're talking here, another big one against a very good Texas Tech team that entered the top 25 this week. Now this time the Buffs are on the road. Shira James has been injured. Don't know if we'll see her down at Texas Tech yet, but the Buffs got a rebound. They're not going to get a lot of RPI points in the Big 12 the way they are easier to come by in the Pac 12. So a result of Texas Tech is going to be crucial for this team as far as the NCAA tournament picture and really just to get their confidence back.
Mhm.
Losing like that at home against TCU, it's not just it's one thing to lose, but it's another thing to get rolled at home, especially after you scored the first goal. It had been playing so well for really 2 months leading up to that. So they've given up 12 goals this season, and now 9 of them have been in their 2 losses. So I guess when they play bad, they make sure they play really bad,
Yeah.
uh, and goals come in a hurry for the opposing team. But really got to get it on track at Texas Tech, and then follow it up with a home match on Sunday against UCF and
Well, and that's
volleyball.
real quick. I mean,
Go
that's
ahead, go
brutal
ahead.
too. To like one loss, you drop from 14th all the way out of the poll.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's
So
how
one
ugly it
loss to a
was,
top
right?
25 team. I mean,
Yeah.
that's brutal in soccer. But
Well, it is, and I mean, watching that game, I don't blame the voters for doing so. They didn't look anything like a top 25 team playing at home.
right, right.
It was a bit of a harsh. I mean, it wasn't just that they were barely out. I think they unofficially finished like 32nd or so. I mean, they were quite a ways down the list of the others receiving votes. So it wasn't like they narrowly missed the poll again. I think other
Yeah,
people watched that game and kind of thought what I thought, like this was a real clunker for the program. But
yeah,
plenty of soccer remains, and in the Big 12 down the road, you have a conference tournament that they never had before in the Pac-12. So by no means, kind of what we're saying with football, by no means does one result ruin the season, but they've got to get back on track because they are running out of time, that is, to kind of offset that result going forward.
yeah. And then how about volleyball?
Yeah, volleyball, kind of playing the waiting game. We talked about your hurricane travel exploits a couple weeks ago. The volleyball team was supposed to play Wednesday night down at Central Florida. Obviously, Hurricane Milton, another bad storm rolling through the region. They preemptively early in the week moved that match to Sunday. Worked out well for the Buffs. It was kind of a 1 week match for them anyway, so didn't have a lot of from the Buff side of things. Didn't have a lot of things to juggle. They could wait this out, but kind of a long wait now. They'd picked up their first conference win against Texas Tech, and now play three in a row, kind of right in a row. Now they were going to have a week in between games, but following Central Florida, they will do kind of a more familiar run through the Arizona schools later next week. But this team got picked up a good win against Texas Tech. Obviously, it's been a little up and down. Maybe expected that with this team, but going to see how they respond with three road games, and obviously will be well rested. They've kind of opened the season with a glut of games, but making up for that with this extra rest before Central Florida.
Yeah, awesome. Well, lots of good things coming up in CU sports, and a big one on Saturday. You get the basketball, inter-squad scrimmage, and then the football game against K-State. So it should be a fun afternoon and well, I was gonna say evening, but late night for Buff
Late
fans.
night, evening. Let's save my seat at the at Folsom Field while I make my way over from the inner squad.
I'll do that. Mason will be there. So
Sweet. Well, yeah, put him to work. Get him to
yeah.
do it.
So Mason's my son, and he's finally getting to go to a game this year, so he's excited about that. So yeah, we're gonna have to put him quote grabbing or something like that. We're gonna have to
Yeah,
put him
he's
to
old
work.
enough now. He should be helping us out more proactively than in years past, I think.
Yeah, I think we need to get him one of the company issued laptops and have him do a notes package or something.
Exactly. Exactly. I like it.
Awesome. Well, we'll see you on Saturday.
Yeah, I'll see you then. And as always, folks, thanks for listening.